FarmBits podcast, a product of Nebraska Extension Digital Agriculture. I'm Jackson Stansel.
And I'm Samantha Teaton, and we come to you each week to discuss the trends, the realities, and the value of digital agriculture.
Through interviews and panels with experts, producers, and innovators from all sectors of digital technology, we hope that you step away from each episode with new practical knowledge of digital agriculture technology. Hello, FarmBits followers, and welcome to another episode of the FarmBits podcast.
We are glad to have you with us as we begin diving into the topic of precision land management.
On this episode, we welcome Schmidt of Intelinair, a company based out of Champaign, Illinois.
Connor had a unique path to the agriculture industry and to Intelinair, which he'll tell you a little bit more about in this interview.
In this episode, we cover a range of topics from Intelinair's product offering AgMRI to the insights that AgMRI is offering for management practice such as fungicide applications, but the primary focus as far as Intelinair's insights go will be on drainage solution installation insights.
Farmers have seen the value of bringing this data together to improve their decision-making process and target their drainage installations.
So with that background, let's go ahead and dive right into learning about Intelinair with Connor.
Mount Pulaski, Illinois is a small town. We had row crops and we had hogs. And when I was about 7, the hog market crashed. We just put a ton of money into these hog buildings and everything else. Turned out to be the exact wrong time. And that took us out of farming. So my dad went into some sales and things like that in agriculture. And I honestly lost a lot of interest. Up till that point, it's like all I wanted to do. But kind of getting out of the actual farming, riding the combines, everything else, and going into school, I started to lose interest, but I caught a knack for sports and ended up playing football, wrestling once I got into high school, and ended up being decent at it and decided to play football at the University of Illinois, which, this year we got one win and it mattered. There was a big win over Nebraska, so I've got to throw that in.
Yeah, don't rub it in too much.
Yeah, right. we had to make the one win count. So
that's right.
One hit wonder. So anyways, yeah, I played football there, and my dad he's like, you got to do ag business. You got to go into AgR. And I revolted after a semester of that. Dropped the fraternity, went into a kinesiology degree, but it's weightlifting. If you don't know, basically they teach you how to weightlift and what a heartbeat is and all that. So I didn't learn a whole lot, but I was a strength coach for 2 years after that under Schmidt at the University of Illinois.
Okay.
And I hear you play football.
I did.
So this will make sense here. I found out after those 2 years about the worst job in America.
Playing at 3 a.m. mornings, I imagine. You had to go lift after the football players.
You got to pre-set it up and then move it all day. And then you're not done until everyone else is out because you got to be there. Yep. It's a mess. So anyways, I get out of that. Or actually, I didn't. I was like, okay, I need to be a PE teacher maybe, but then you have to go get a master's. And I was out of options, and I was kind of upset I didn't, listen to my dad. Well, he comes around about that time and says, you ready to get a real job? Yeah. I was like, yeah, I am. I had to swallow my pride there for a bit. And Intelinair had just started at the University of Illinois in Research Park. There were about 15 people at the time. It was 2017. Okay. And they brought me on as an intern. And I was really excited, actually, because there were a lot of large, progressive, influential farmers in Illinois that had started working with them. Okay. Under the premise that it was going to help them find their problems, picking up these insights before their problems, so they have time to fix them, taking a lot of unknowns out of the season, out of the growing season for them, the guesswork. So I was pretty excited about it, but it, a little naivety. If I knew what I knew now when I started, I don't know that I would have been as gung-ho about it. The technology space is really complex. Yes. And, a lot of problems are actually symptoms. And sometimes that's difficult to separate from the outside. And, at the time of starting, just because I was doing sports and everything else, the first customer call I made at Intelinair, good story. My manager at the time, they're like, hey, can you call our customers and see what values left the rest of the year? And it was August. And I called them. Sure. And I was like, hey, Connor, great to meet you. What values left in the season? He's like, I don't know. Can you pick up stock rot? And I was like, well, that's a great question. Let me get back to you on that. And so I'm in the hallway. I walk back in the office. Hey, Katie, what's stock rot? And thus began my journey. That's a long rant, and I'm excited to tell you all about that journey and kind of the value proposition we've uncovered with our product and
Sure.
how it's helping people. But I'll tee you up there.
No, that's great. It seems like there's been a lot of learning so far in your career. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so interesting turn of events of how you came across Intelinair. You want to share a little bit more on the insights and those product offerings within the company?
Absolutely. So the first mistake a lot of people make when they look at our company, they think this is an imagery company. That's just a component. It's a data analytics company, or I like to say a crop intelligence company. And our goal is to consume all these pieces of data across the board, whether it's weather, machine data, the imagery coming in, and then just the agronomic intelligence from some of the agronomists we have on and customer needs. I aggregate all that brain trust and data and use computer vision and machine learning to punch out answers, to remove guesswork, to make people more efficient. And I hear a lot about peace of mind because people are seeing their fields differently and they're getting a new perspective of them and full visibility. And you can look at our YouTube channel. There's some customers that speak to this. Check it out and listen to them. What's really fascinating to me, despite all of the actions they make through the season, the one thing that these guys all come back to, it's really nice to know, to have all these eyes on my crop, to have all my partners, family and farm partners seeing the same thing all the time, having that visibility and knowing that, there's nothing that's going to surprise us. And I've done everything I can to produce the best crop I am able to this year. And I can, rest easy on that. And it's the collaboration, visibility, the peace of mind with all the stressors of that growing season that really appeals to these people. Not to say they don't get a lot of money out of it, not to say they don't make a lot of decisions, but when they come out, we see this like spark in these people's eyes. This feels like when the yield maps came out, and we didn't know it was going to be so big, but once we started catching on, it changed agriculture. And you see these guys, it's not just like a logical, I'm adding some bushels. It's like this transformative thing where it's like peace.
Sure.
And I think that's what I'm most excited about delivering to our customers, a change in the way they operate their farm and a peace of mind in a stressful, challenging farming environment.
Sure. And so the kind of this consuming of data, bringing all this data together to form these insights is kind of embodied in the AgMRI platform, right? And so can you tell us a little bit more about kind of how AgMRI works? What's left on the back end? I know you referenced machine learning and computer vision. So can you kind of explain that a little bit more for us?
Absolutely. So to bring this down there to be practical, we've got 3 different data sources. I can tell you about the differences here in a bit, but you've got satellite. And within satellite, you have different levels of resolution. For instance, a Landsat, like a 10 meter, all the way down to about a 50 centimeter. We've got fixed wing aircraft, and those capture a 10 centimeter image. And we don't fly our own drones, but we love to partner with drone companies and pull their data in because there's a place for that, right? And some people really need that extra level of precision, or there's a gap between images. I need to get my drone up. There's a storm, things like that. So you've got these 3 different data sources coming in. You've got all the outlying data around it from the machine. What did they plan? What did they apply from the weather? All of these things. Then what we do, we create these analytics that kind of walk with a customer through the season. So regardless of which service, we're going to cover you from bare soil to harvest. I'm going to focus on the fixed wing for a lot of this, and that's 13 flights, right? So it's a weekly cadence in May and June, once in April, twice July, twice August, once in September. So they're covered across. And then on our analytics, the first thing you're going to get is these emergence maps. which will tell you your populations across all your fields. It'll also tell you where you need to replant, and it'll give you an alert if there's an area with low emergence in addition to that replant, so you can assess those areas. You move into these weeds. We're able to pick up weeds, acres of weeds, densities, and weed escapes. And we'll show you a dashboard with all your fields prioritized by this weed pressure. And it really helps people. It helps on that bare soil too, but especially in this post-pass on timing, staging of crops, when to go to which fields, where do I have fires, weed escapes. It helps with the efficiency. And I think there's also a much better weed control that comes out of that. It's difficult to quantify in bushels added, but it's a great tool for our customers. Next comes this plant health area, right? And so around P4, because we have this high resolution, we're able to give people a really good reading on the plant health.
Sure.
Some people like to use that in addition to that post-pass to see if they need to add some micros or do something different on nitrogen. And that'll carry all the way through this fungicide pass, where they may need to add some micros based on plant health. But in addition, we have a thermal map, a thermal camera on this airplane, and it's spectacular at picking up disease. And so it really helps people be precise with their fungicide. And I would love to build on that in just a second. But to top off the suite of analytics, you move into harvest. We go into September because we can see where a crop's drying down and give people an indication of where they can start harvesting and what the logistics need to look like across their operation there in the first half of September, which for a lot of our customers, it's always a headache. They're running around, shelling corn, trying to see the moisture, where can they start? They don't have visibility in the middle of that field. They get going, figure out it's not what they thought and have to move. We help a lot in that area. And it's one of the things I didn't realize how impactful it would be until we were delivering that analytic. That all gets consumed on an iPhone, an iPad, or on desktop. They're all pretty similar. The iPhone people like to use out in the field. It's a little more on the fly. The desktop and the iPad are really good for digging into fields. And the last thing before I move on, the value out of this. I put it into 3 buckets, kind of to simplify, because you can tell it's like a Swiss Army knife. There's a lot you can do. One's management optimization. And the way I explain that, I've been told typically it's a 3-year process to improve a management practice. Think of how you're doing tillage or your combine setup. Year 1, I think I have an issue. Year 2, I pay attention to what I think the issue is. Year 3, I try to fix it. And then sometimes there's a 4th year, I scale that if it worked.
Yeah. And
in that process, if the weather changes, if the products change, etc., you might not get the same environment to accurately test that. So it's a guess. And with AgMRI, because you have that visibility across the whole season, you have the whole story. You find your issues in 1 year, you know what to do about them in 1 year, and you implement the change in 1 year and you can scale it. And
Sure.
it's streamlining people's management practice advancement, so to say, and just adding bushels like exponentially in the background. Another bucket, proactive decisions. I have a weed escape and go spray it. I know where my replant is. I'm going to shoot that over to my monitor, and that's going to help me save time. We've seen people double replant acres per hour using that tool. Things like that. Some nitrogen, still here, micros. I'm going to apply a fungicide. That's that bucket, like these alerts, these insights before problems concept. Mm-hmm. And the last bucket comes down to efficiency. And the unique thing about our platform, especially in terms of this fixed wing service, you're getting all of your fields flowing simultaneously, but in a very high quality of definition so that you maintain the ability to definitively say, those are weeds, this needs replanted, and that's dried down, right? You can't really do that with the satellite. When you have that simultaneously and all your fields are prioritized, it becomes a really good tool to decide where am I sending my equipment today, what's most efficient, what's the order I'm going to harvest in, the order I'm going to replant in, the order I'm going to spray my weeds in. These types of use cases come into play, even down to scouting, if people do a lot of scouting. Being more effective with that or reducing it because you have a lot of the answers already. And so I would say it just makes people a lot more efficient. Those are the 3 big buckets of value that our customers are seeing.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds really good. And I've heard that about, there is a big push in the space, right, to kind of create these scouting efficiency platforms. And so I think that's a huge value add, like you're talking about. Because if people can just be better with their time, then they can actually be better with their management, even if they have the same amount of data, and obviously y'all are presenting it to them in a different way, in a way that's, consolidated, they can make better insights from. But even if they're saving that time, they can make better management decisions because they're not having to worry about running around all over the place.
Yes, and it's not just making the scouting more efficient, it makes it more effective for multiple reasons. They're going to areas and fields that they've decided to go to beforehand with an idea of what they expect to see there and why they're going there. So each trip is higher value, and the insights gathered from that trip have a higher impact and efficiency. So there's efficiency, and on top of efficiency, they're unearthing more issues that are actionable. On top of that, you have a different perspective of it. A lot of people, I think, looking at it just as like a scouting tool can kind of box you in.
Just curious, what is kind of your user profile of this? Is it more for individual growers? Is it for agronomists, co-ops? Is it specifically just growers using it?
Mm-hmm.
Share that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all of the above. Something that's really cool about our platform is it creates synergies. It's a platform that's a win-win when as many people want to jump in. So let's take a agronomist. They have all of this visibility. Of course, they can do a better job with the grower, getting to the problems and all of that. But what I see that's really cool, it elevates the level of conversations. So they go from solving these really, year over year problems that are always an issue to making those more of like table stakes. And then because they're both looking at the same thing and have this shared visibility, shared perspective of the field, they're able to talk about these higher level problems that are more pertain to the farm and the management practices and things like that. And it's been really cool to watch an agronomist or a salesman, instead of they're going in and talking about the product or what they saw on the scouting trip, to go in and they're talking about how to make the farm better. They're talking about the farm. And it seems like those salesmen kind of come into the fold, and the grower really buys in, and there's a peace of mind. And it's a unique platform that allows for a lot of healthy collaboration that's mutually beneficial for everyone involved. There's a lot of value to a grower, a lot of value to a salesman, to a co-op. It's really just been awesome to see how it ties ag together, when implemented correctly. So I would say all of the above.
Sure. So to kind of keep narrowing our conversation here, one of the things that we're really wanting to talk about this fall on the podcast is precision land management. And so I saw a case study on y'all's website kind of about how one of the insights that you can help to generate is drainage decisions for farmers. And you're not necessarily providing the decisions, is my understanding, but the data that you provide can help farmers get to a decision about whether or not to install a drainage solution. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about that case study and just kind of get that conversation started for us?
Absolutely. A lot goes into this. So the first thing I want to say, when you think about improving drainage with a map, the first thing you usually hear is, well, I already know I have a pond in the field. So I already know, right? So, what value does it add if I already know? So what I'm seeing, there's a quantification component. The biggest challenge, I think, in capital investments in land comes down to, well, it costs X, how much is the drainage issue costing? And year over year, what's the impact of that in each given environment? And I think it gets underestimated very often. I think it really does get underestimated. And so the very first function on these maps is to remove that guesswork, show them exactly how much damage those drainage issues are causing across that field, and allow people to quantify it. How much area, how much yield. So that's kind of the first step. Well, you want to go to a second. So they say, it's costing me a lot of money across all my fields. Here's, say, the 3 that are really costing me. So there's a couple different scenarios. The farmer might own that land and decide to make that investment, or it might be with the landlord. I think it's very valuable for a landlord, especially if you're not familiar with ag, to understand that field. And this has been a great tool to show them the impact of that drainage and show them how a capital investment is going to increase the value of their asset and to what extent. So it's a great tool to speak to that landowner to help them understand the contribution they're making to their asset and why they need to make that investment. And then you kind of get into the design phase. We've had some growers look at that drainage issue and take it to a designer rather than just putting in some pattern tile. I've seen some really cool designs where it's patterned, but then they'll create these little legs that kind of specifically target these hard to drain areas, and you know, the grades, all of that, and get it really precise. So it can definitely help in the design of that plant. And then last, the improvement, which there may not be a monetary value there, but I think it matters. I think it matters to the people making the investment, whether it's a landowner or the farmer, to know and have peace of mind if this plant worked, or if it didn't, why. So that mistake doesn't get made again. Mm-hmm. And so it's really cool to watch a lot of our customers who have used these maps to make these really tight drainage plans and see the result the next year and see you can't even pin out after some of these improvements where those ponds were in the past. You never would have realized they were in that field. And I think that's powerful for a landowner. Let's say you have other fields that he owns that you're renting. If you need those tiled, I think it's powerful for the grower to know that his methodology worked and he's going to tile more fields to kind of hone in on the best practices. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So kind of from that standpoint and thinking about the data and interpreting that data, what are some of the key factors that affect somebody who's making a drainage solution decision? And what are the data types that, I guess, in your experience have been most, most valuable to a grower in making that sort of decision out of the AgMRI platform, what Intelinair provides?
Yeah, I'd really like to focus on the data that's valuable. Mm-hmm. So there's a red, green, blue. That's what you see with your eye. That's the first one that's very valuable. They're able to see that field and see the saturation in the early season, a darker soil type or standing water, and quantify that area. And then they're able to match that up later in the season when they might start seeing some denitrification or emergence issues a little sooner than that, and start to get a tally on the impact. Thermal is also very valuable because a lot of times you're seeing a big temperature decrease in the soil. And it's in areas where you wouldn't necessarily realize there's more moisture.
You can't see it just kind of on the surface.
You can't see it on the surface, exactly. And it has a much larger impact on soil temperatures than I even would have guessed. And I really think that matters because, with these genetics, a lot of them don't have the same type of culture. And when people are making decisions on what to plant, when, things like that, that can end up having a huge outcome as the season goes on, especially as we're planting earlier, especially as we're moving towards a lot more minimal or no-till type practices. So you can end up with a perfect disaster if you have more moisture than you expected affecting that temperature with a mat of residue. And that may end up being a field you plant early with a hybrid that doesn't handle the soil temperature as well. And you can start running into issues, right? So, and then it can also go into gauging the scope of the area that's affected because it might be larger than you realize. And then taking both those layers and kind of looking at your yield here and getting that final number on how much it mattered and making sure you're quantifying the right zone and attributing that area correctly to drainage and not to a different issue. So you know exactly what's causing it. It makes it really easy to discern. Is that helpful?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think the other part of it too. So when you're, working with a farmer, in order for them to kind of do that quantitative analysis with yield data, is yield data either coming into the AgMRI platform, or are you providing like maps they can overlay with their yield data to kind of make that sort of quantification? How exactly does that work, that process?
The yield data can pull directly into AgMRI through an integration with Climate or John Deere. We're hoping to expand some of those integrations as we go forward. There's a lot of different sources for it. We're very flexible on APIs. And really, if someone wanted, anything as a shape file could be pulled in. You can download on USB, push it in. Once, let's work with that integration for a second, though.
Yeah.
If you integrate with the climate of the year, your information is going to pull in from the cloud automatically. There's no manual component. It's about a 2-minute setup at the beginning of the season. Makes life very easy. Field boundaries come in, hybrids, varieties, planting populations, everything if you have tillage hooked up, speed, depth, chemicals, fertilizer, those sorts of things will pull in. And then at the end, your yield map, all without touching anything. You can take any of those layers and compare it or overlay it with the other data sources we're providing, rather it be a thermal, rather it be an emergence map. Any of these things can be compared next year as applied, and it really pulled us some interesting insights.
Yeah, I think that's a huge, very important piece, because really nobody needs to necessarily be doing this geospatial analysis on their own, especially the farmer has 100 other things to be doing at that point in time, doing that analysis. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned bringing those insights in to make those insights. Do y'all have a weather data aspect in AgMRI to kind of compare weather patterns to make these strange decisions as well?
Mm-hmm. The weather does come into play, as does topography. I suppose I should have mentioned that earlier. You should have been looking for it in soil data. We have a weather platform in AgMRI, and where we think that's really important. There's a lot of weather sources out there, but we don't think there's anything that's really optimized to agriculture. I know there's a lot of people have to look at several different platforms, kind of to compare, contrast, and then they also do the wind map. Well, the wind is this, and it rained that much, and it's been so long, and okay, maybe I'll go see if I can straight. We would love, and we're working on it, creating the weather platform that pulls those farm critical pieces of information and gets closer to the answer that they would come to on their own without the mental. So yeah, we have weather. We do use it in a modeling aspect with the field to help add some color to what's happening. But we try to focus on what's actually in the field in terms of the information we provide them. So the weather may give more context to what's in the field, but we like to stay away from, you've got gray leaf in that field because it was hot for X day. We don't like to get into that business because each field has a different set of criteria or context, the tillage, the hybrid, drainage, everything that plays into what actually shows up on that field. Weather plays a role, but the ultimate source of truth is that real-time image of the field paired with what you're seeing from the data and everything that happened to create that outcome. And when I was talking about big data and aggregating to the answer, that's the concept.
Sure. So what are some of the other things about the AgMRI platform that really excites you? I mean, we talked about drainage a little bit, which is just one case study, but what are the other areas that you're really excited about?
A lot of exciting things. One I want to focus on right now is disease, because it is becoming a top of mind issue. In Nebraska, I hear a lot of southern grass moving in. In Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, it was tar spot. And we had a huge impact on it. I'm going to explain how, when I want to apply it to what we're seeing in the field in our environment. We have a thermal map that picks up temperatures. When a plant is infected with disease, the first thing that happens is an elevated temperature on that plant. Sometimes, in some diseases, that temperature can happen long before there's a visual symptom. In other cases, it's a bit tighter of a window. But the important thing here, the fungicides are not curative, they're preventative. You have to get them on proactively. With most imagery, red, cream, blue, and DVI, something like that, you won't see a disease until it is so bad in that field, there are so many lesions on that leaf that there's less chlorophyll for that camera to pick up. By that time, it's across the whole field and it's probably crossed an economic threshold. When you use a thermal map, you'll see the heat move in, but you won't see a change in crop height. You won't have any way to explain it. go to those areas, we've seen a very, very high success rate. There's a disease that just started in that spot, and if you literally walk outside of that area, there's nothing there. So it gives you the ability to be extremely proactive. So there's a couple things. Let's say it's tassel time. Yes, you can be a little more informed about which fields to spray, which ones not to. Where I see a huge impact in this environment, Illinois, Indiana, especially, as you saw. A lot of people sprayed their field at test. So you have 10 to 21 days on that mode of action. Towards the end of July, another wave of disease came. The one that's really top of mind is tar spot, because it progresses very rapidly. It'll take over a field in a week. That's exactly what happened in a lot of fields. People have already sprayed them. They weren't out checking.
Just at one time for the year.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's a big investment as it is. Well, that tar spot moved in, took over these fields, and it was bizarre. That first week of September, you'd be driving down the road on Monday and everything's green. On Tuesday, it's not as green, but you don't think you're crazy. Then on Wednesday, it's all silver. And you're like, am I imagining this? You know, and no, it killed the crop that fast. And it had a tremendous impact. And there's a standability issue. There's years that look like it's one wind event from being a disaster. We helped our customers because we saw a lot of that coming in at the end of July. And we helped a lot of people make an informed decision on a second pass of fungicide, tar spot. Now, I imagine if this continues, if this disease issue continues to get worse, there may be a need for a 2-pass fungicide system. But that's another large investment. Is this a product that can help people decide which fields need that investment and which ones don't, so that they don't have to roll the dice twice? You know, roll it once, $30 everywhere, and then the second time, do I spray, do I not spray? We can see tar spot have a 20 to a 50 bushel impact even after that first fungicide pass, depending on your planting date and maturity length. So
GDDs you have to go.
Exactly. Yeah. It can just wrong in that greenfield time, not to mention standability issues. So this is a really big issue. I don't know how hard the southern rusted and Nebraska coming over the top, but I know that was a real issue. Sure. But I think we're going to see more of this, more aggressive diseases. In a longer time frame, we need to worry about having protection. Sure. And we can really help take some of the guesswork out.
So is there anywhere that our listeners can go to learn more about Intelinair, if they have further questions on social media or anything?
Absolutely. We actually just launched a new website, AgMRI.com, AgMRI.com. Yep. Go check it out. It's one of a kind. I mean that genuinely. It takes that Swiss Army knife, makes it very, very simple. It tells you how it's going to help you, exactly through examples that it narrates that are from some customers that have been kind enough to share them, for the benefit of the broader audience. So they can see exactly how people are using it. It breaks it down. It shows what analytics, what type of decisions can be made, how we create that analytic and decision with our product, all of that. Makes it really simple too. It's not a bunch of reading, just kind of pulls you through the flow. It's a quick dive. You get a really good grasp of the product. It's really cool. AgMRI.com. Go check it out.
We'll send our listeners there one question before we get to the very final question. So AgMRI, I'm assuming that we're kind of getting at the medical MRI and how it's a diagnostic tool. Is that what the name is kind of getting at there? Or?
You're going to get me on a tangent because I was just talking to a customer today who's an agronomist.
Okay.
And he made the analogy, not me. I don't think he realized the play on words with the MRI. But he was saying, I kind of felt like a doctor this year, and something cool about the product. My customers weren't just coming in because they wanted to look for a problem. He's like, you don't go to the doctor just because you want to see something. You got to go do your check-ins and everything else. And there's a lot of value having the peace of mind that, hey, you're healthy. And he said, I'm using this product. My customers are coming in. Maybe they just want to check out 1 or 2 fields, right? Like, oh, I got a sore throat, right? 1 or 2 fields. And they go in and they're looking and they're like, well, what about this one over here? what about that one? And he was this expert kind of that knew how to read these maps and break them down and talk to them. And there's a few complex issues he would solve, just periodically as people were coming in, or a lot of peace of mind gain that what we're doing is working, and kind of placed himself as this advisor or this doctor. And, kind of goes on. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like an MRI. He's like, yeah, you know what? It's like, before there were any MRI machines or anything else, you had all these doctors and giving the best guess they could about what to do. And he's like, I feel like I'm one of the first doctors to have that MRI machine that I can actually look at this data and tell them exactly what's wrong. And then it was really cool because he built on it. He's like, well, someday I'm sure everyone will have that MRI machine, and it's going to come down to who's the best doctor at reading an MRI to get you to a better answer. And I think that's cool. When I talk about elevating conversations at the beginning, that MRI machine in the medical field elevated the level of conversations people are having, the types of solutions doctors can bring to these people. And that's how I feel about agriculture. So absolutely, AgMRI is a great metaphor for our product. It goes beyond finding problems. It's just a new way of seeing the field. It's going to take agriculture to another level. That's what I'm excited about.
What advice do you have basically for any farmers out there who are looking to make better decisions using data? Like what advice would you have for them?
Absolutely. My advice, understand where you want technology to work for you, and then go look for the technology. Don't look for the technology, then try to figure out how to make it fix your problem. There's a lot of heartburn created in that. There's a very specific way our product's designed with a lot of customer feedback. And it has a specific set of use cases it's trying to solve. And I have a lot of pride in the way we do business and serve our customers, in that we listen to their needs and use cases. We're very honest about what we can and what we cannot fix in regards to the problems they have. So I don't know if every company brings that same level of consultation in selling the technology, or if they have the depth of knowledge to really fit it in. I'm sure a lot do. But my caution would be, just from seeing some of the things my growers have said and the resistance I see a lot of times, bringing precision technology out. Know what you want to fix, and make sure that the solution you go to find to fix that can actually meet those set of criteria, because technology can have a huge impact on your operation. If you pick the right thing and you know how you're going to use it before you get into the season. And one other thing I'd add, if you invest in a technology, it's really important to invest the time to learn it. It's a bit different in technology. It's not like you're buying a hybrid and you plant it and it's better or worse. You're buying really a set of information or insights or something of that nature that can make you better if used properly. So if you know what you want to fix and you feel good that you found the right technology and the right set of insights to help fix that, there's a third piece there, and it's learning the product and learning how to apply it. Yeah. And that's also very important.
Thank you very much to Connor Schmidt for taking the time to join us here on the FarmBits podcast. I thought that was a really interesting interview. It was nice to hear a little bit more about Intelinair's platform, AgMRI, how it's bringing data together. I thought one of the interesting insights that Connor made about their product is that it's kind of elevating the conversations that folks have with their agronomists, or salespeople have with their customers, to kind of take the conversation just from, okay, this product or that product, but really how can we help you at full farm level, because they do have that integrated data to see how that product is kind of fitting into the rest of their management practices. And I think there's a lot of value to that. It's creating a lot more efficiency, I think, in those relationships. So
yeah, that's a good point. I think it's really important for the growers to be able to elevate, like you said. I think one of my favorite parts was the fact they can include not only satellite imagery, but they have drone fixed wing imagery to tie into those insights, and gives the growers a really good different perspective on what their fields look like and try to get ahead on those management decisions.
For sure. Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us on this episode of the podcast, and be sure to tune in with us next week.
Thanks.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today on the FarmBits podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts to be informed about the latest content each week.
We welcome your feedback, so if you have comments or questions for us, please reach out to us over email, on Twitter, or in the reviews section of your favorite podcast platform. Our contact information can be found in the show notes.
We'd like to thank Nebraska Extension for their support of this podcast and their commitment to providing high-quality informational material to the members of the agricultural community in Nebraska and beyond.
The opinions expressed by the hosts and guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not reflect the views of Nebraska Extension or the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
We look forward to you joining us next week for another episode of FarmBits.